Tell me what the hell are you scared of when in the end the only thing
Where's
that's
the love?
left
Right here on
love's
this
in the
podcast.
air.
Welcome to Love
Love
Drops,
drops.
where your hosts and One Love ambassadors, Charles and Diane, will share love, hope, and inspirational topics taken from their journey and world events. We will also include on location recordings and special pop up guests from cool places all around the world. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Whether big or small, love never fails. Oh, love it conquers all. Love never fails.
Welcome to another edition of Love Drops Podcast. We are very excited for our guest today. We met him by way of his parents. We read his adventures, which he's going to share with us today. And just from the first update, I was all in. He had me at diving in Palau. I was there. I was all about it. So, without further ado, Charles, would you like to bring on our guest?
Yes, he is very unique in all of his adventures and sharing them with us. And with that, we'll turn the mic over to Yannick.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yannick Peterhans. I'm a photojournalist and a diver, originally out of Los Angeles, where I worked for major news publications for the last couple of years. And I'm currently based in Vietnam, where I work as a dive master at a local dive shop.
Wow. So, Yannick, let's just jump in. What inspired your journey? So, you were a photojournalist and now you are a dive master. Two
Mhm.
things that can be easily entwined. But how did you get there? How did you get from LA to Vietnam? Take us on a journey.
So they really are the birth of two passions that I've had for many, many years. I fell in love with photography growing up and looking at photo books, and I was never a big reader, but I loved looking at images and seeing history through the photographs taken. And so also being passionate about traveling, when I found out that photojournalists can also travel internationally, I kind of knew this I needed to figure out a way to make this a career. And so I went to University of Southern California and studied journalism there, and then got connected with various outlets. I used to work for USA Today and the Associated Press as a freelance photographer. And then the diving side is really, man, I mean, it's over a decade in the making of traveling to various destinations and seeing photos of the underwater world, and never really pulling the trigger on becoming certified, because there are a number of sort of safety procedures to make sure that you're a
Mhm.
safe diver, and then there's some industry standards that you need to take care of. And so I never really got there. But then in 2019, November of 2019, I got certified, and following March, the world got shut down. And so I wasn't able to dive for about 2 years or so. And then I took a scientific diving class at USC and got introduced to task loading and taking notes and diving with slates and all the stuff and all the fun stuff in the really murky and cold Southern California waters.
Mhm.
Uh, but I loved it. I thought it was so fun. I thought it was so cool being under the water, and you're with fish and kelp, and you look up and you see the surface, and it really is the closest you'll ever get to like being in space, in my opinion. And so um, I just kept chasing it and finding ways and reasons to dive, and had opportunities at some point to buy an underwater housing from someone that I had met in Belize. It was a used housing that he was selling, and just kind of kept on building and finding ways. I worked on stories first at school and then at USA Today later on, where I would be bringing my camera underwater. One of them was on an urchin diver that worked off the coast of San Diego, and I was diving with him 80 feet down while he was harvesting urchins to then go sell. And he's one of the last urchin farmers in Southern California. It's kind of a dying breed of blue collar work where you also have to go dive and collect urchins for a living. It's quite unique. And then it just grew, and then this past spring I had an opportunity for a staff photojournalism job fall through, and my girlfriend Summer recommended, like, why don't you look into dive master opportunities, knowing that it's something that I always wanted to do. And it is one of the things of finding the right time in your life, and also the right reason to go has to make sense. Because you can do these certifications locally, but in my mind, it was, if I was leaving California and, my life in the US, at least for the time being, I might as well go to someplace really cool and interesting. And I'd known about Palau for a number of years through scuba diving, because it's quite legendary for just being pristine, and then ended up pulling the trigger to go out there this summer.
Wow. Woo, you said a whole lot. I got to circle way back. I mean, what a cool journey. Number one, you had this passion to dive. You got your certification in 2019, and then the world shut down. And so, like you said, you weren't able to really dive in the way that you had been certified or trained. So that gave you a couple of years to simmer, with this adventure and really kind of look at it from every angle. And after doing that, you decided, yeah, this is something that I want to do. So you incorporated it in your schooling, in your contract work with USA. And then you said you got some of the supplies. So the first question is, what is a housing? What is a housing, a diving housing?
Underwater housing.
Underwater
Yeah.
housing. Yeah,
Underwater housing.
for us that are lay people. What is that?
So there's a number of problems when you take photos underwater, and the first one is the water itself. Things aren't waterproof, and so you need to put your nice fancy electronics into something that keeps that safe. And if you're just at the surface, you can use like a bin, put it in the water, and then stick the camera in the bin. But the deeper you go, the more issues you have with pressure. So an underwater housing is essentially a giant case for your camera that not only keeps it dry from the water, but then also keeps it safe from the immense pressure that you go down. And so pressure is essentially an exponentially larger problem the deeper you go. So my dive housing, I think it's down to 300 feet or so. It's rated that it can still take photos. But it's a big issue that we have, because then you also have to clean it and take care of it. And salt water is notoriously vicious to all things electronic. So I take care of my housing like it's my baby.
Right, right. That's your
Yes,
livelihood.
it is.
I mean, that's your bread and butter. So yeah. And then the other question was, the gentleman that you were diving with off of San Diego, you said he was going under to collect, help me.
Sea urchins?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. So what's that?
Sea urchins are, they're mollusks technically. They're in the same family as clams. Don't quote me on that. But they're little round creatures that have spikes poking out of them.
Uh-huh.
And they're collected for uni, is the dish that you can buy at a sushi restaurant, and you eat the gonads essentially. So if you
Okay.
open up a sea urchin,
Okay.
it will have the roe inside the sex organs, and you take that out, and that's what's quite valuable. If you're in California, or really anywhere where uni sea urchins exist naturally. You can actually harvest them yourself. So this is something I would usually do as somewhat of a party gag, I guess, when I would take people tide pooling in California. I would go harvest a sea urchin because they're not invasive, but we have a bit of a sea urchin problem. So it's not a problem if you harvest them. And I would have a knife and cut it open, and you can take out the gonads and you can eat them like uni. And they taste I personally don't think they taste super good, but it's a kind of a fun party trick.
So is it like a delicacy or something? So it's kind of like, so he's going for food, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
got it,
we sold them to a distributor in San Diego that supplied local sushi restaurants. And
got
so
it.
it's really important when you're doing like ecological fishing
Mm-hmm.
that it's essentially like farm to table fishing, but it's all
Okay.
on the local reefs in California.
Okay.
And it's a lot more ecologically friendly than importing. Like we have here in Vietnam, there are also sea urchins, but if you harvest it from San Diego, you know, for one, you support local fishermen, two, you play a part in regulating the local reef in case the in this case the sea urchins are overgrown, which I don't believe they were. But three, it's important to eat from the local environment.
Wow. That just spells out a great deal of things and obstacles. And what are some of the obstacles that you ran across in all these adventures?
They're nonstop, right? Like one of my favorite things about being a journalist is we're essentially professional problem solvers, and I mean, it just never ends when you're dealing with humans that have real stories, and you're asking them to reveal and tell you about some of the most vulnerable or challenging moments in their lifetimes. It's a sink or swim situation where you get really, really good at figuring out solutions to these problems. And so I've developed these skills of learning how to work with people and, you know, kind of deal with people regardless of where they're at in life, and figure out a way to still produce a story that is based in integrity. I mean, we as journalists, like we really hold that as our standard, that we don't pay our subjects, we don't coerce our subjects, we don't violate them in any sort of way, and yet we are still expected from our publication or our editors to produce stories. And so it's a skill of trying to solve those problems, and it's really exceptionally valuable because you
Mm-hmm.
can use
Yeah.
skills when you're not dealing with people and you're just kind of navigating the roller coaster of life.
Yeah, the roller
Yeah.
coaster of life. So it's funny you say that because everything that we do in life leads up and prepares us for whatever that next adventure is. So speaking of adventures, what you're doing right now is an adventure. And so you're actually the subject of the story, right? You're actually creating your own story, your own narrative. So in this journey that you're doing with the diving and to, become a master diver and, now you're in Vietnam, what were some obstacles that you as the subject encountered getting you from LA to Palau and now to Vietnam? What were some of the things that were obstacles or challenges?
The biggest challenge to getting here is finding work, because it doesn't, like, the dive industry definitely has opportunities really around the globe, but I wanted to work somewhere where I could work towards my instructor training. And this opportunity here in Vietnam was one where I could do that, where I could work as a dive master and work towards my instructor certification. But really, for me, it's tough to identify specific challenges because
Mm-hmm.
the way that I navigated this was really like following the path of least resistance. Like there really are a number of ways to do this. And I just started reaching out to dive shops all over Oceania and in some part Asia too, but out in Australia and Indonesia and the Philippines. And then here in Vietnam as well, I reached out to, they're called Rainbow Divers, and asked them about the opportunities that they have. This came to be like that. And frankly, Palau was the same way. I was looking for a dive shop where I could be somewhere in Oceania and then
Mm-hmm.
finish these two certifications, the dive master and the instructors. And
Okay.
it just happened to be that that dive shop in Palau offered that. Speaking of adjusting, they ended up not being able to do the instructor course because they didn't have enough people. But, it's kind of, you just adjust and you figure out what's next. So for me,
So that
next
could be
was,
an obstacle, no? I'm saying because when you left and you planned, you planned your trip, and yeah, we're very familiar with like planning your trip, and you have it kind of all set out, be it on paper, computer, in your mind, whatever, and then something kind of goes left. So
yeah,
Palau, like your plans was to go to Palau and just do both the diving training and then the instructor training as well. So
yeah.
when that did not happen, how did Vietnam come in? Because was Vietnam even on the radar in the beginning?
But certainly not in the beginning. Once it didn't really come to fruition in Palau, I had started to look for places that were offering these instructor courses. And Vietnam made sense because I could work here, and it was important to me that I could gain experience while I was doing the course. Because you can also just pay and do the course in a matter of a couple weeks or so. And I would rather spend, in my case, months. I mean, I'm here in Vietnam until November or so. I mean, it is kind of flexible, but I just wanted that experience. But
Okay.
in some ways you are right. Like there are consistent problems in doing these things, and like I said, all of it is just problem solving. Like when we were first in Los Angeles and we were figuring out how we were going to do this, like one of the major problems we had was getting rid of all of our, when I say our, I'm talking about me and my girlfriend Summers, all of our stuff. We had essentially like a life in LA, and so we had to
Mhm.
figure out a way to get past that. And part of it was selling it, part of it was throwing it out, part of it was giving it to friends. And then you manage and you figure it
Yeah.
out. And then in Palau, it was within about 3 weeks of being there, it became clear that the instructor course wouldn't work out. And so it was also a matter of adjusting. And in sort of the macro, I adjusted and came here to Vietnam. But in the micro point of view, I ended up being able to spend some time on a liveaboard in Palau and produce the
Hmm.
images for that photo book that I'll be producing or am producing. And then I was also able to go on another trip to the Southwestern Islands, which would be the stories that I'm pitching. So
Wow. So
down,
there was
but
some wins. So yeah, I see that in your journey, and Charles and I, it resonates with us because the same, you have things that don't work out the way that you plan, but end up kind of elevating the adventure because it takes you to places and spaces that you didn't have on your radar, but were brought into play as a result of just your willingness to continue. It's almost like you have things that will come along as, I say, obstacles or challenges. And it's just those are to help you navigate ahead and sometimes to redirect you into something even better than what you planned for. But it is definitely a persistence and determination to keep going, right? So you said one of your obstacles was getting rid of your stuff. So that was Charles and I in Pasadena about 9 years ago. We had a house full of stuff, just grandkids, just
Mhm.
things for forever. And basically we gave away and threw away. We gave away and threw away. We didn't sell anything, and fortunately for us, we had children. Our
Yeah.
son was there. And so he was just moving into a place. So a lot of the things were able to be transferred to furnish, his new place with his family. But the funny thing is, I read in one of your stories, you narrowed it down to 5 boxes, and you were able to, lock away 5 boxes. Whew, we had to pack our car. So we didn't even have a storage. So we had to pack our car. So some of the things our personal things that were important, we sent ahead to our
Mhm.
children in Michigan. But yeah, it's a challenge, and it's not an easy task at all to,
Yeah.
condense life, right? But how freeing do you find it? Because for us, it was so liberating because you realize you don't need all that stuff. So what about
Totally.
for you?
Like I kind of always consider myself somewhat of a minimalist. Like I don't know, I just never had that much of a will to like have a lot of things, and so I really enjoyed getting rid of my stuff. But I think on the flip side of that, I am quite sentimental about things, so it does kind of the balancing is
Charles
just strike.
is.
Yeah, between like what do I keep and then things that mean to me. I think the two of those five boxes were just papers and things from college. I have kept every single piece of paper that I've written in college, and I do all my notes handwritten. So every single thing I produced in college, I still have. And for better or for worse, I've kept on to it. And so those are things that I'm not currently super willing to get rid of. And part of that is the sentimentality of all the work that I did. It just takes up
Yeah.
so much space.
No, I mean you never know. You never know what that will become.
Yeah, what you're gonna get rid of and what you want to keep, and then everything you want to keep, but you have to
Yeah.
get the light for the flight.
But
Yes.
part of that is also like I'm kind of on my high horse there, or I believe you pay for the intellectual property of a college degree, so I might as well keep it. But
Yeah, well, yeah, that's yeah, yeah.
Now, throughout all of this, what are some of the experiences and things that you picked up along the way? Some of the wins.
well, man, I mean, it's pretty incredible. Working as a photojournalist in LA, you are on the front lines of history. And so in when I was working last summer, I was there during the strikes, that the SAG-AFTRA strikes, and these were major
Yes.
strikes in the cinema industry that are in many ways like once in a century. And this past spring, I was covering the Palestine protests at UCLA, and they were also very, very historic in their own right. And then being there in Palau, when I had the opportunity to go to the Southwestern Islands, I was traveling with a government boat, and
Hmm.
essentially they need to travel there every 3 months to refuel the communities that live on these remote islands with really not a lot of resources at all. There's not really running power. It's either solar or a generator, and then the water is from wells. I mean, it's very, very simple living. And so there's no tourism industry because of that. And so the opportunity to go on a government boat was very, very unique and something that not a lot of people are afforded. And so I spent a week-long trip. The ride down was about 2 days. I spent all 40 hours in bed throwing up because I had
Oh
terrible
wow.
seasickness. And then once I arrived on an island called Helen's Reef, which is where some of the state rangers live. There's four rangers there that live there at 3 months at a time and don't have any contact to their families or anything during that time. And they involved me in the hunting of the local seabirds, and they involved me in the process of it all. And then I slept on the island, and the next day I went to Hautobi Island. It's about it's about a 6 hour drive by boat to the west, and that
Hmm.
was where the majority of the community lives, and they built their houses and live off the land. And so when we got there, they roasted some chickens for us, and then the following morning we had coconut crab for breakfast, which is on mainland Palau, it's a real delicacy, but on these islands, this is just, it's part of the local cuisine. And then for lunch, we had yellowtail tuna sashimi. So it's very unique. Like you really, really live off of what you have. When we landed, they just start cutting out coconut water. You're working to bring all of these goods onto the island, but during the breaks, there's people that just cut up the coconut, and you can just drink essentially unlimited coconut water because it's
Wow.
just falling from the trees. So it these are sort of the moments that make it all kind of worth it. Kind of like, oh man, pinch me, like what's happening. It's
Yeah.
just like, even so now, fast forward to Vietnam. Coming here, the first few days was, once again, sort of the existential threat of what on earth am I doing here was setting in. But then, today we saw an octopus while scuba diving, and they're very, very rare. You don't really see them a whole lot. And so I was like, man, That's so cool. Like, how can you not want to continue, right?
Wow. Did you take a picture of the octopus?
I have my camera on me. Took a
What?
minute. I know.
What? And I say that tongue in cheek because some things are just for us to experience. Some things are just for our soul, not so much to, just capture with the camera because really you can't capture the essence sometime of it. And sometimes it's just for our soul. But when you were talking about the islands that you went to, that was just so amazing to me. It reminded me of a time when I was in Jamaica and I was in a part and it was called Lucy. And
Mhm.
according to our standards, it would, you would be like, oh my God, they have so little. But when you really look at it, they have so much, we have so little because they have so many natural resources and they have joy and they're just they're doing life. They're not caught up, or at least back then it was a while,
Yeah.
but they weren't, just all on the devices and things. And you had the jerk man just standing by the water, and he made his own drum and he was out there jerking chicken, best jerk chicken you could ever, have, better in any restaurant I've ever been. And it's pretty amazing because it reinforces the simple things in life is what are really, those are the priceless things. Those are the price,
Yeah.
especially when we're on these journeys, like what you're doing, what Charles and I are doing. We need to revisit and we need to have that in our essence to power us to keep going because you can pull back on that experience. Like if you are feeling like, oh, I need more or I don't have enough,
Yeah.
then you go back and then think about that. And it's like, I can do it. I can find a way. It helps with your perseverance, your determination. I think it's interesting that we all started our journeys from California. You were in LA, we were in Pasadena. So, and I joke about it. I says, like, California is like this portal that like shoot you out. It's just like
Yeah.
go out into the world, go start an adventure. It kind of does that.
And throughout these adventures, simplicity becomes a luxury. It really becomes a luxury. Yeah, you look at that. Wow.
Yeah. And so one thing I wanted to jump back, I did not want to complete this interview without jumping back before we jump forward. And that's the road trip that you got to take with your dad. We met
Mhm.
your mom and
Yeah.
dad last month. And so your dad said something that you wrote in the article, and it's like, oh yeah, I won't waste the road trip. He is like all about it. He's all about, getting out there. And that is something that is endearing to us and inspiring to us because we're the same way. So tell us a little bit about that road trip that you took with your dad from LA to Sarasota.
Well, put you in the right frame of reference. When we arrived in Sarasota, my dad was like, "You want to keep going to the Keys?" It's like, man, we just drove 4 days and you want to keep going. Like, he loves it. It's just so truly the biggest takeaways is we rarely get sort of unrestricted time with people. Really broadly anybody, but it's really special when it's your dad.
Hmm.
And we were each other's captive audiences for 4 days straight, and it is really something that I will never forget, and I'm eternally grateful for because I really can't think of a lot of other scenarios where you're in a situation like that. And so
Hmm.
the road trip itself pretty mundane. Like we're just driving all day long and doing nothing but driving. And then we probably the highlights is you stop at some country mart in the middle of nowhere. And our style is going out of the way to not be on highways, and we prefer to be on country roads. And so you do get some quite unique restaurants and establishments, and you can kind of see the country a little bit more than just driving east on the 40.
Right.
But the highlight really is all the time that you get to spend with like my dad, who since moving out and going to college, it just becomes increasingly tough to be able to spend so much time with each other and have no other choice but to just kind of sit there or talk.
Yeah.
And both are fine with me. Like it's a beautiful drive, but it's lovely to be able to chat while you're on it.
Yeah. What did you learn about your dad that you didn't know in those 4 days?
This is actually a really lovely question. I learned a lot about sort of the early days when he came to the United States. I had watched something on social media that was along the lines of like, here are 10 questions you should ask your dad
Hmm.
before it's too late too. And one of those questions was like, what were you doing when you were my age? And just like, investigating to see the parallels. And so I don't remember the exact questions, but it was along that same frame of trying to figure out kind of like what's going through your dad's mind when he's also like your age. And he was 24, I believe. He had just moved to the US or was shortly moving to the US. And so it's very, very, very different times. Like these are the late, I guess he was already there. These are kind of the late 80s, early 90s living in Los Angeles. It's
Hmm.
really unique, and it's cool to see like what he was doing because in his own right, he was on a very similar adventure. He had also essentially uprooted his whole life and moved to the United States to go to school here.
Exactly. Exact the parallel. And that's what I was trying to get to with that question, because it's so interesting to just see the parallel in our lives. So like you went back to see, how you and your dad were parallel. And like with me, for instance, every single day that I look in the mirror, I'm like, oh my God, I'm becoming my mom. I say things that she say, to my kids, to the grandkids. And so it's interesting how we are just all intertwined, right? How we're similar, but like Charles would say, we're the same, but we're uniquely different.
Yes.
you know, you know?
Yes, because when you were sharing about your dad, I reflected back on my dad when I became his age and some of the
Hmm.
things that he shared with me. Technology was different, education was different, opportunities were different. All the
Hmm.
differences were there, so I could smile at some of them. And I say, if I think I had it rough, what did
Yeah.
he go through? So it gave me a great deal of appreciation.
Yeah.
Yeah, a great deal of
Yeah.
that.
And it was good too for you, Yannick, because starting this journey, right? It is motivation and inspiration because you can say, well, hey, I'm in Vietnam, but my dad around this age, he took the journey as well. And your dad is a cool guy. I mean, we've met in person once, but just hearing about him from your mom. Yeah, just really a cool guy, real full of adventure. He will, just take the leaps, and he'll
Yeah.
go on that journey. He'll go on that journey which has been instilled in you directly and and indirectly as well. And to have 4 days just unrestricted, concentrated, where it's just you and him, it helps when you miss him because you can pull from that, and it becomes not so mundane, right? You remember the little things, and you remember the things you guys laughed about. You probably remember how I'm sure he offered to drive, but that was your bragging right. So how did that go? With him in the passenger seat, how was that?
Well, that was also unique because he's never in the passenger seat. Part of that is he gets motion sick, and so he doesn't like it. And I know the passenger seat, he won't get motion sick, so don't worry, he wasn't suffering for all 4 days. But because of that, he prefers to drive, and really like he is always the one driving. I don't know when else do you have an opportunity to drive across country? And I was like, I'm gonna see if I can do it all myself. And so I was just like, I remember I laid down the law as soon as we left, 9 a.m. in LA. We're leaving, and I was like, by the way, I'm gonna try to do this all by myself. he was fine with it. He's like, okay, see if you can do it. And our
Wow.
really our only restriction was if we fall behind schedule, I'm gonna have to start driving. And so I was like, yeah, works for me. As long as I can keep up the pace, then I'll see if I can get it done.
And you did. I mean, you did get it done, and it was very symbolic because you did it, but you had your dad, right? So your dad had your back, and it was just like if he needed to step in, he would step in for
Mhm.
you. But it's just like, how cool is it to do something for the first time and be able to have someone that is so near and dear to you to experience it with you? And not only that, but you had the opportunity to drive your dad. So it was just like driving Mr. Patrick. No, like driving Miss Daisy. No. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just saying you had the opportunity to do that because as you mentioned, he likes to be in the driver's seat. And so for him to surrender that to you, it's almost like kind of passing the baton, right? Kind of passing it to you, that endorsement. So, like, go into the world now, Yannick, and be great. I believe
Yeah,
in
well, my parents definitely have played like a very large role in all of this. I remember one of the key things I remember from my dad. This is back in probably middle school. Like we were very young. When I say we, me and my sisters, but he said like my one along the lines of this, my one goal in life is that you guys are happy, and the rest of it really doesn't matter too much. And truly, like my parents have done in their own rights similar things to what I'm doing now, really in their own ways too. But when I was chatting with my mom maybe a couple weeks ago now, she was saying that almost to the date, also when she was 24 years old and some change, she was in Vietnam on her own kind of journey in life. And like serendipity and what have you, it is in many ways unique that the times lined up like that.
hmm not by accident at all. Very synchronistic, very, very in sync, right? Very in sync. What I'd like you to do is just tell us, what are you currently doing right now? Like, what's life in Vietnam, and what are you looking forward to?
So right now I'm doing a lot of diving. So I'm working as a dive guide essentially, and I'm leading divers that come to Rainbow Divers. On the project side, I'm putting together a photo book from the images that I made in Vietnam, and it's a real task of love, so it's going to take me a little bit, but
Yeah,
I'm working with a small publishing house in the US called Bayou Books, that's helping me put it together, and he's a colleague that I met from the photojournalism community. And then I'm still working on pitching out the stories that I did in the Southwestern Islands. Pitching is also a real labor of love, and many times editors are busy or it doesn't align with the editorial schedule they have going on, and so you just kind of have to keep knacking at it. I mean, if we're looking at the win and loss column, my loss
Mhm.
column for successful stories pitched is way bigger than my win column, but you know, part of that is
Yeah.
just kind of the name of the game. And then, going forward, I'm definitely still looking to work as a staff photojournalist in the States. I really am truly enjoying my time out here, and so I see no reason to stop. I'm just gonna kind of keep going as long as it works. Like my approach to this is that the worst case scenario is I come back to the US and figure out a job there. And so as long as I can make it work out here, I'm going to try to make it work. And if a big opportunity winds up back home, I'll go home.
I love it. I love it because you have dared to just jump so far beyond your comfort zone, right? To make your dreams come true, to work on your passions, to work on your purpose. You found your own niche, right? You did, even though you say you took the road of least resistance, I think it depends on how you look at it because maybe in your adventurous family, this is the road to least resistance, but to like someone in the States, maybe with a different experience, This
Mhm.
would be like a road of, like you just creating your own path, which is not really the easiest thing that you could do. You could have
Yeah.
stayed with the norm, but what you are doing in every right is exceptional. I mean, and it speaks to the person that you are. It speaks to the passions that you have. Because when you have a passion that will just take you away from everything and everyone, including your girlfriend, Summer, shout out to Summer, just that's huge. That's huge because you're working on something big right now that'll pay out big ahead.
Yeah.
That will pay out big ahead because even for something big in the States, it won't be a question whether you'll go for that job or whether, you'll take the leaps or whether you'll go beyond where other people will stop because you're
Mhm.
doing it. So, like what you're doing speaks to the character, speaks to the perseverance that you have, speaks to the integrity, speaks to the man that is Yannick. And I mean, at 24, it's saying a lot. It is saying a lot. So I just want to, give you kudos and a virtual high five
Yes.
on, what you're doing.
And with all of your determination, will behind that fortitude, your win column is going to be astronomical.
Yeah, for sure. For
Astronomical.
sure.
And I know a lot of folks would like to follow your examples, the way you've set it out, and the way you've just took the bull by the horn, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I mean, I'll keep on posting updates on my LinkedIn, on my newsletter of sorts, but it really is more of just a page of life updates and career updates and whatever else I find interesting to write about that week. And then I do routinely update my Instagram with my photographs. And so that's really like places where I want to keep updated with the world. What's weird
Mm-hmm.
with me is I'm actually quite antagonistic against social media. It in many ways drives me absolutely nuts.
Same.
But
Same.
it is also the world we live in, and it can be actually quite fun to write. That really the inspiration for my newsletter is to become a better writer. And so I figured, like, why not force yourself to write every single week? And I had the same thing with my Instagram, like, why not force yourself to produce photographs that you find worthy of publishing? And so, you gotta tip the scale at some point.
Tip those scales, Yannick. I have a question. Do you have a website right now?
Yeah, my website is peeronsphotography.com.
Okay, you'll email me that link. You'll email me
Mhm.
the link to your website and I'll put it out there. Now, does your website have links to like your LinkedIn and your Instagram accounts?
Yeah, it will all be linked there.
Awesome. And does your website have your photos? Because some people like us, I don't have Instagram or Facebook because I mean, I share the sentiments with just the social media. I do have a website,
Hmm.
um, but LinkedIn, that's about as far. I mean, I've had the others, I found them to be distractions to what,
Yeah.
to what I'm doing. So just kind of cut those loose. We have a page on our website that we call Our Village. So we have like 3 blog pages. Charles blogs on one, I blog on another, and then we have a page that is called Our Village. And so what I'd like to offer to you on air here is, as you're doing your update, if you email me, like once you write them and put them out there, if you email me, I can post them in Our Village. And so that also gives you additional exposure, with what you're doing, and then just kind of help promote that as well, because I found that as we promote our journey as it's going on and you get people interested in the journey and begin to follow the journey, then when you release that photo journal
Hmm.
and when you release your stories, you already have the audience. You don't have to go and build the audience. It's kind of like Field of Dreams, where it says, if you build it, they will come. So
Sure.
it's just like start your building right now and just know that it takes a village, and know that you're not out there by yourself. I mean, we're with you on this. You know, you got your parents and you got so many other people, but you know, we're here for it. We're here for all of it. So it's just like, you know, you're not in this alone. You know, you're not in this alone. We're not only willing to read and share your updates, you know, your adventure updates, but we're willing to put them on, you know, our platform as well, where other people in our circles, villages, and things from around the globe can also get in touch and follow this journey that you're on, because it's incredible. It's an incredible, incredible journey. And, you know, so Charles was going to ask you this question.
Yes, I was, because sharing is caring. And
Yeah.
with that said, what would you leave our listening audience with in the form of inspiration?
Form of inspiration. Oh man. Well, I'll leave you with the testament that has taken me through all this of what will happen. And I think there's really kind of a joy in the simplicity of following life as it presents itself to you. And I, you know, like I agree, there's a number of things throughout my life that have built up to give me the opportunity to be where I'm at. You know, there's no lie about that. But also there is a lot of truth that wherever you are in life, I think following the path as it presents itself can be quite freeing. You know, like I think in within the world of what will happen, there's kind of a mystery of what's around the corner that can be a little bit scary. But I also think it's very freeing in that you don't always need to worry about how it's going to work out in the end. And then whatever presents itself, if you can rely on the assumption that that's good, you know, I think that's not a bad place to start. I twist my brain into all sorts of knots with figuring out the inspirational quotes and, you know, the different guides to life. And I think the one that I've settled on is just kind of letting it present itself to you as it will present itself. And I think that's as much as you can expect from it as it can expect from you.
I like it. And so my interpretation of what you said is just let go and go with the flow.
Yeah, I mean it's almost like too simple. And I've certainly, and you know, I've caught myself kind of being too wrapped up into the complexities, but also like questioning the simplicity of it. And I think the fact that there's a real dichotomy there, that there it is actually like a double-edged sword, and do you fret the complexities or do you, you know, rely on the simplicity? But it's worked for me. So you
Yeah,
know, I'll
right.
take what I get.
Right. I mean, you're out there and you're doing it. And I think it was like pre-recording, we were talking with you, and you mentioned a key word, and that was just balance. And that was just like finding your balance. And I think that goes for and with any and every journey. You find your balance, and it is simple, but then it is also complex.
Complex, yes.
It's complex because of what it is that we are doing, but the road to it and the steps to get through it are simple. So sometimes we make our simplicity complex. We make,
Yeah.
because it's just too simple. You know, it's just like it's like it has to be more to it than that. It can't just be that. For example, just do it.
Yeah, it can be so simple, it's complex.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
We dig too deep at times.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, and I mean, I think also like you really can't forget the work. Like it doesn't, one thing that can get lost in going with the flow is thinking that things are just kind of gonna happen. And like none of this just kind of happened. Like it's a lot of work that you have to put in to make it happen. But I think as
Hmm.
far as the ending result or what you hope to get out of it, whether it's good or bad, I think just kind of going with the result is the easiest way that I've been able to find. But it is work. I mean, it's all of this is like a
Yeah, for
lot.
sure. I mean, like, so when I personally say like go with the flow, there's always a focus there. So like I'm focused on an outcome. You have to be, otherwise you get all these distractions.
Yeah.
Because like going, you can have an end goal, but there's so many roads to
Hmm.
lead you there. And so, but it's just like, but what is your road? There's so many ways that you could get the certification and get the
Yeah.
instructional training. There's so many, but it's like, what is your road? What's the adventure for Yannick, right? What's the path for Charles and Diane? Yeah, it's a lot of ways to take this journey, but what is our path? And what's your goal? What is your mission? And for us personally, it's bigger than us. It's
Hmm.
bigger than us. It's not just about Charles or not just about me. And as you're doing it with photography, we've taken pictures, but we're doing a docu-series. So we got a docu-series that's in post-production, and you're talking about, the pitching. Well, we are right now just attracting our investors. We feel like the docu-series pitches itself. So we feel
Hmm.
like instead of going and knocking down doors, we're attracting, because what we want is coming for us and we're here for it, right? And the main thing is, for whoever chooses to invest in what we're doing, you have to be excited about what we're doing. We're
Totally.
not going to convince you. We're not going to hype you or get you excited, because if you're the right person for what we're doing, you're going to be excited. You're going to see what we're doing. You're like, I've been looking for that. And so just as a word of encouragement to what you're pitching with your stories, the same applies. There's just keep going with it. Just keep allowing it to be there, because it will attract the
Yeah.
the right person, because you can have a great story and you can attract someone great with the wrong motivation, and then it can just kill the story, right? Or just, because they want to kind of maybe change it a little bit or make it fit into this or that. But this is your
Yeah.
soul story done from love by you. So the right person is going to see it and they're going to connect with it just as it is. And they're going to look at you and they're going to say, go run with that, and not try to tell you how to run with it or how to make the story. They're going to let it go, because they're going to see the magic in what
Hmm.
you've done. You know what I'm saying? So just keep going. Don't stop.
Yeah. Yeah. No plan there. I'm gonna keep on keep
Yeah,
on.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's
And
right.
as this journey continues and our listening audience are biting at the bit, what are some of the best ways for our listening audience to get in touch with you
And support you.
and support you?
Probably my social medias is the best. So on Instagram, I'm just at Yannick_Peterhans. On LinkedIn, it's also just Yannick Peterhans. This is the highlight of having a really unique name, is not hard to find. So
No.
and my website is peterhansphotography.com. So it's all out
Awesome.
there.
Awesome. And we will
Great.
attach it with this podcast. We'll put in narrative. And I tell you, this has just been a great conversation. I can't wait for it to be released. And I'm not going to wrap it up because I'm a girl, so there are girls that are listening. And for all the ladies out there, maybe even some of the guys, what's up with you and Summer? Like, how are you guys staying connected? Where in the world is Summer, and how are you guys supporting one another?
Yeah, it's always tough. This was the first time Summer and I have done any resemblance of, like a long distance relationship. I think for me, and I can only speak for myself, but it always just settles in like a great trust and a love that I have for her. And, like I'm just not worried. I think we're both on our own path, and we will meet back up once we are done with this chapter of each of our lives. And I think in the same way that she's giving me the rope to go and dive and sort of pursue this path, I have no problem I mean, in fact, I encouraged to give her the same leeway. And so, you know, it's obviously tough. Like the best that we've been able to do is video call, and especially at Palau or where she's right now in Niue, like the connection is just horrendous. And so, you know, you don't, it's tough to build a connection when you can't even really say your inside jokes. But I don't know. I feel like it's just like an internal trust and a love, and like I'm just personally not that stressed about it. You know, like I'm very, very excited when I get to see her again, likely in October or so. October and November. We'll just kind of see how it develops.
All the stories you'll have to tell. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's great with that connection because that's resemblant of back in the day when someone's overseas and someone was in the States, say,
Hmm.
and making the calls, and sometimes the connect and the
Yeah.
calls would drop. But I mean, personally, I think it gives an appreciation to the conversations. It gives appreciation when you can come up on the screen, whether it's 5 minutes or 50
Yeah.
minutes, you appreciate that time. What about emails? Are you guys able to email or not really?
Just text. We have like WhatsApp is probably the best way to communicate internationally, and like all of our Wi-Fi on social media and all that still works. I think in large part it's just kind of figuring out how to stay in touch with like the little things, and also like realize when we went into this, we both signed up for it. And I think like
Yeah.
that's a big deal. You know, like if I was back in the States or if she was still back in the States, I think this would be like a very different conversation. But
Hmm.
we both kind of said we're doing it. And so
Yeah.
like get what you get, right? Like there's no version of
Wow.
traveling internationally without being separated for some period, especially when we both have very different goals. Like she was very, very excited to see these remote islands. And I really just wanted to go dive and pursue these stories. And in many ways, like those two goals aren't super congruent. So, you know, you figure out what you can.
I love it. I love the trust. I love the love. And I just love both of you guys for just taking the adventure because so many people just don't. I mean, in the scheme of things, it's a few months out of your life. And
Yeah.
it's an answer to that question, what if I would have did this, or what if I would have, did that? You guys will both evolve and come back together at an elevated level, and then what happens next from there, you'll see. But I love that you guys both had the courage to do it, to follow your passions.
Well, and honestly, I have to sing her praise too, because she had like a real corporate, like 9 to 5 job, like some real security that I didn't really have as like a freelance photojournalist. And like I really admire that she was also willing to leave that behind and go and pursue a dream that she's had for a long time. And so like honestly, in many, many ways, what she's doing is like way more difficult than what I'm doing.
I don't know, because if you asked her, she may, just flip it and say the same, say the same about you. Summer, I know you're going to hear this, and so, hey, we got a mic for you, Summer. Whenever you're ready
Whenever
to,
you're ready.
whenever you're ready to tell your side of the story, we're here for it. And Yannick, we would just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for
Yes.
sharing your story, your adventures. We really see great things for you. We'll be keeping our listeners updated. Definitely would love to have you back, further on, maybe once you have those books out, or once you have
Yeah.
those stories picked up, because they will be picked up, even to the fact that maybe you and Summer come on together, however it looks. We're leaving the door open for you, and we're thanking you for your yes and for being our guest here on Love Drop Podcast. Any closing words before we sign off?
I just gotta send my appreciations your way, and I gotta say I really appreciate that you guys gave me some time to chat, and kind of weird being on the other side of an interview because I'm usually where you guys are sitting and figuring out, how to have an uninterrupted 40-minute interview isn't always the easiest thing. And so I want you guys to realize that I appreciate your guys' skills to interview successfully, and thank you for having me on. It really it's been very fun talking about the last couple of months.
Well, we thank you.
We thank you very much indeed. That was some information that I never heard. I've read about it, but here it is. I feel as if I've experienced it from the way you
Absolutely.
shared it. A
Absolutely.
real experience.
Yeah, and if you read his updates, you really get a feeling, and there are also gorgeous pictures alongside with it. So we will do our part in, just sharing that also with our listening audience. And however you felt led to help support the journey and resonate, however it resonates for you, go for it. And if you're out there listening, and you have the potential ability to open the doors for getting his stories out there, please get in touch with Yannick, because
I
we're
appreciate
only
it.
attracting the best.
Heck yeah.
Heck
That's all we can
yeah.
ask for.
That's all we're going for. That's right. And so with that, we will end our episode as we often do. We say thank you for subscribing, sharing this episode and all the episodes of the podcast. We appreciate your support. And with that, we say one love.
Never a second will I waste, never an opportunity to taste the sweetness of this life.
Thank you for tuning in to the Love Drops podcast. Be sure to follow this podcast and share the love with everyone you know. Until next time, this is Charles and Diane signing off. One love.
Love it conquers all, whether big or small. Love never fails. Oh, love it conquers all. Love never